Street kid sees Millionaire's mom crying and does something that changed his life. Among the puddles and the rumble of traffic, a young boy made his way through the crowded sidewalks. He was no older than 15, with tangled hair and worn-out clothes that barely protected him from the chill. His shoes had holes, and every step he took splashed water into the thin fabric. But he was used to it. Life on the streets had taught him to keep moving, to keep his eyes open, and to trust very few people. He had been walking for hours, searching for something to eat. The city was full of smells, some sweet, some bitter, some overpowering, and he had learned to follow the ones that promised bread, fruit, or leftovers. Today, luck had not been kind. Trash cans were mostly empty, and restaurants either turned him away or ignored him. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he had learned to ignore it when necessary. Hunger was not new. It had been his companion for as long as he could remember. As he turned a corner, he noticed something unusual. On a park bench under a large oak tree sat a woman. She was dressed differently from anyone else he saw in the city. Her clothes were clean, neat, and expensive-looking, a sharp contrast to the worn jackets and torn pants of people walking past. Her shoes were polished, and her handbag rested carefully beside her. But what caught the boy's attention was not her wealth, it was her expression. She was crying. At first, the boy hesitated. On the streets, crying often meant weakness or danger, and strangers rarely offered comfort. But there was something about the woman's sadness that felt different. It was quiet, almost hidden, and it seemed to call to him. He stopped a few steps away, unsure if he should turn and keep walking, as he usually did. His curiosity and perhaps a small spark of empathy won over his caution. The boy approached slowly. "Excuse me, miss," he said softly, careful not to startle her. The sound of his voice was rough from lack of sleep and constant exposure to the cold, but it carried a sincerity that was hard to ignore. The woman looked up, startled, her eyes red from crying. For a moment she said nothing, unsure how to respond to the young street boy who had stopped before her. I saw you crying," he continued. "I have a handkerchief if you want it, or I can share my umbrella. The rain is getting heavier." The woman blinked, a mixture of surprise and something else in her eyes, perhaps curiosity, perhaps gratitude. No one had ever offered her comfort in such a simple, genuine way. Most people would have avoided her, intimidated by her appearance or social status. But this boy, this small figure with ragged clothes and muddy shoes, had approached her without hesitation, without judgment, without expectation. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly accepted the handkerchief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was not just the words. It was the way she looked at him, the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, the way a small tear rolled down her cheek, finally caught by the handkerchief. The boy nodded, unsure what else to say. Silence hung between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain on the tree leaves. He glanced at her face, noticing the lines of worry, the faint wrinkles near her eyes, the way her lips trembled as she tried to hold back more tears. He realized that, like him, she was human, and humans sometimes hurt, no matter how rich, no matter how well-dressed, no matter how protected their lives seemed. "Do you want to talk?" he asked carefully. He had learned on the streets that listening could sometimes matter more than speaking. People often needed someone to hear them more than they needed advice or solutions. The woman looked at him, and for the first time in hours, maybe days, she felt a tiny spark of hope. She nodded slowly. "I suppose I could use someone to listen." The boy sat down on the edge of the bench, careful to leave space between them, yet close enough that she could feel his presence. He didn't rush her. He didn't ask questions that were too personal. He simply waited, letting her pour her heart out in her own time. And she did. She spoke of worries he could barely understand, about her family, responsibilities, expectations, and fears. Yet even in his limited understanding, the boy felt the weight of her words. He nodded when appropriate, handed her the handkerchief when she needed it, and occasionally offered small words of encouragement. "It's okay," he said. "It's going to be all right." For a moment the rain seemed to ease, as if the city itself was pausing to watch this unlikely encounter. Passers-by hurried by, oblivious to the small connection forming on the park bench. But for the boy and the woman, time slowed. The harshness of the streets and the pressures of her life were both forgotten, if only for a little while. When she finally finished speaking, she looked at him again. You didn't have to help me," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "Why did you?" The boy shrugged, his eyes earnest. I don't know, I guess everyone needs a little help sometimes. He looked down at his own muddy shoes, his torn clothes, and added quietly, even street kids like me. For a moment, the woman studied him. She saw more than just his ragged appearance. She saw courage, kindness, and an honesty that was rare in her world. She realized that in this brief encounter, the boy had shown something that money could never buy: genuine compassion, a heart that cared without expecting anything in return. The rain began to fall more heavily again, and the boy stood up. "I should go," he said. "Stay safe, okay?" She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered once more, and in that moment neither of them knew how much this small encounter would change the boy's life or hers. The boy walked away, his mind turning over the strange experience. He had given a small gift, a handkerchief, a listening ear, a kind word, and yet somehow it felt like he had received much more. Perhaps he thought the world was not always cruel. Perhaps small acts could matter even when everything else seemed hopeless. And for the woman, she carried with her a feeling she had long forgotten. The reminder that human kindness could come from the most unexpected places, even from a boy whose life seemed as broken as the streets he walked. That rainy afternoon on the park bench marked the beginning of something neither of them could yet imagine. A connection that would ripple into their lives in ways that neither the boy nor the woman could foresee. After that rainy afternoon in the park, the boy couldn't stop thinking about the woman. Her tears, her sadness, and the way she had looked at him with that mix of surprise and gratitude stayed in his mind. Life on the streets was usually full of noise, fear, and constant movement, but this encounter had left a quiet space in his heart. A space that felt different, less empty than usual, more alive. The boy went back to his usual routine. He wandered the streets searching for food, collecting small jobs, or helping shopkeepers with odd tasks for a few coins. He slept in abandoned buildings, under bridges, or wherever he could find some shelter from the cold night. Life was hard, as it always had been, but somehow he noticed small things differently now. He looked at the people rushing by, the children playing in puddles, the street musicians performing for coins, and he felt a subtle sense of connection. Maybe it was because he had felt how small acts could matter. Days passed, and the boy returned to the park, not expecting to see the woman again. But he wanted to in case she needed someone. He waited on the same bench, under the same oak tree, watching people pass, feeling the wind blow wet leaves around him. At first, there was no sign of her. He began to wonder if he had imagined the whole thing, but just as he was about to leave, he saw her. She approached slowly, carrying a small notebook and a pen. Her expression was calmer than the first day, though a quiet sadness lingered in her eyes. She recognized him immediately. "Hello," she said softly. "I didn't expect to see you here again." The boy shrugged. "I like this park," he said, his voice hesitant. "It's quiet sometimes." He didn't explain that he was hoping to see her, hoping to offer some help again. He wasn't used to speaking directly about feelings. The streets had taught him to hide them. The woman smiled faintly, and she sat down, leaving space between them. "I wanted to see you," she admitted. "I wanted to thank you properly." The boy looked at her curiously. "Thank me for the handkerchief?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "For listening, for caring, for being kind when you didn't have to be. Most people would have walked past me, ignored me, or worse, pretended not to see me. But you cared." The boy shrugged again, a little embarrassed. "I don't know, I know how it feels to be alone," he said quietly. "Sometimes even a little kindness, it makes a difference." The woman looked at him closely. "You're right, it does make a difference." She paused, then spoke slowly, carefully. "You're not like the other children I've seen on the streets. You seem different, brave, kind." Honest. The boy looked away, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to praise, especially from someone who came from a world so different from his own. Praise usually didn't last. It often disappeared with the next hardship, but something in her words struck him. He felt a small spark inside him, a feeling he had almost forgotten: hope. Over the next few days, the woman began visiting the park more frequently. She didn't always speak much, but she acknowledged him with a nod, a smile, or sometimes a small word. For the boy, it was a strange but welcome change. He began to realize that the world wasn't entirely cold and harsh. Some people, even those with wealth and privilege, could see him, not just as a street kid, but as a person. One day, she approached him with something unusual. "I have a question for you," she said. Her voice was gentle but serious. "Would you like to learn something new, something that could help you in the future?" The boy frowned. He had learned many things on the streets, how to find food, how to avoid trouble, how to survive. But learning something new sounded strange. What kind of something? He asked cautiously. Things most people your age don't get a chance to learn, she said. I have friends who could teach you skills, help you understand the world in ways that are different from what you see every day. It's not easy. It will take time, but if you want, you could try. The boy hesitated. His life was unpredictable. He never knew where he would sleep, where his next meal would come from, or whether anyone would look out for him. But there was something in her eyes that convinced him she meant what she said. Something in her tone that promised not just help but guidance. I don't know, he said finally. I've never done that kind of thing before. That's okay, she replied gently. Everyone starts somewhere. You don't need to know everything now. You just need to take the first step. The boy thought about it. He thought about the nights he spent hungry, the days he wandered alone, the countless moments when he wished for someone to believe in him. And slowly he nodded. Okay, he said. I'll try. From that day forward, his life began to shift, slowly but surely. The woman introduced him to a small group of people who taught him basic skills: reading, writing, counting, and understanding how the world worked beyond the streets. He learned about money, about planning, about thinking ahead. It was difficult at first. He had spent most of his life surviving one day at a time, and now he had to think in weeks and months. But he persisted, because he had seen what kindness could do, and he wanted to honor that by giving his best effort. At the same time, he never forgot his life on the streets. He continued to help other children when he could, sharing small lessons or giving a hand when someone needed it. He became known in the neighborhood not just as a street kid, but as someone who cared, someone who could listen, someone who could make life a little easier for others, even while he struggled himself. The woman watched him closely, amazed at his determination. She saw a boy who had faced unimaginable hardships, yet refused to let them define him. She saw a spark of intelligence, creativity, and leadership that few people noticed. And she realized that helping him was not just about giving him skills. It was about recognizing a potential that had always been there, waiting for a chance to grow. Months passed. The boy's confidence grew alongside his knowledge. He learned to read and write better, understand numbers, and even manage small tasks that required responsibility. He learned about trust, respect, and communication, lessons that money could not buy. Most importantly, he learned that someone believed in him, and that belief mattered more than anything else in the world. One day, as they walked through the same park where they first met, the boy paused and looked at the woman. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." She smiled, her eyes softening. "No, thank you," she replied, "for showing me that kindness can be found in the most unexpected places, and for reminding me that people, any people, can make a difference in someone's life." The boy nodded, feeling the warmth of the moment, knowing that his life was slowly changing. He had gone from surviving day by day on the streets to stepping into a world where possibilities existed, where learning and growth were possible, and where someone cared enough to help him find his way. And yet he never forgot the simplicity of that first encounter, the rainy afternoon, the handkerchief, the shared moment of empathy. That small act had started everything. It had sparked a journey that would change his life, one step at a time. From the streets, he had begun a path toward something new: hope, opportunity, and a future that, for the first time, seemed within reach. Life for the boy was slowly changing, but it was not yet easy. Every day brought new lessons, new responsibilities, and new challenges. Though he had begun learning skills beyond what he had ever imagined, the world outside the streets was still unfamiliar, intimidating, and full of rules he had never needed to follow. But he faced it with a quiet determination, remembering the kindness that had first reached him on that rainy afternoon. The woman continued to guide him, introducing him to new people who could teach him different skills. There were mentors who taught him reading and writing in more depth, others who showed him basic math, finance, and even some business concepts. The boy soaked it all in, sometimes slowly, sometimes struggling, but always trying. He had never had this kind of attention or support before, and he realized that he could actually learn, really learn, when someone believed in him. One day, the woman called him to her home. Her house was enormous, nothing like the small shelters or abandoned buildings the boy had grown up in. Marble floors reflected the sunlight, paintings hung on the walls, and the air smelled faintly of flowers and perfume. For a moment, he felt out of place. He had never been inside such a house, and the size of it made him nervous. "Don't worry," she said, noticing his hesitation. "You don't need to be afraid. This is just a place where you can learn more comfortably. You're not a guest. You're here to grow, to explore, and to see what's possible for you." The boy nodded, trying to absorb everything without feeling overwhelmed. Inside, he met the woman's son, a young man who had recently become a millionaire through his own hard work. Unlike the boy, he had grown up in wealth and opportunity. But he was not proud or arrogant. He was curious and kind, eager to meet someone whose life had been so different. "Hello," the boy said, his voice quiet. He wasn't used to speaking with people who had so much power over the world around them. He wondered if they would treat him differently because of his past. "Hi," the young millionaire replied with a smile. "I've heard a lot about you. My mother says you're very hardworking and brave. That's rare. I'm glad to finally meet you." The boy felt a mixture of pride and fear. Pride because someone he had admired from a distance now saw him as worthy. Fear because he didn't want to disappoint. I try my best," he said softly, and that became the beginning of something new. The young millionaire offered the boy a small position in one of his business ventures, not as a servant, not as a worker to be looked down on, but as someone who could learn, participate, and grow. The boy's heart raced. This was an opportunity he had never dreamed of. But with it came responsibility, discipline, and challenges he had never faced before. The first few days were difficult. He had to follow rules, complete tasks he had never done before, and interact with people who spoke differently, acted differently, and expected different things from him. He made mistakes. He spilled coffee, forgot instructions, and sometimes felt completely out of place. He wanted to quit, to go back to the streets where life, though harsh, was simple and familiar. But every time he considered giving up, he remembered the woman in the park, the kindness she had shown him, and the belief she had in him. That thought pushed him forward. He decided that he could not waste the chance he had been given. He would try, fail, learn, and try again. Slowly, he began to improve. He listened carefully, asked questions when he didn't understand, and paid attention to every detail. People began to notice his efforts. Even his colleagues, who had initially doubted him, started to respect him for his dedication. The boy realized that hard work, persistence, and honesty could earn recognition, even in a world that had always seemed unfair to him. One day, the young millionaire asked the boy to help with an important project. It was not just a small task. It required thinking, creativity, and initiative. The boy was nervous. He knew this was a test, a chance to show what he had learned. He spent days preparing, researching, and practicing. He wanted to do everything perfectly. When the day came to present his ideas, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. He stood before a group of experienced adults, people who had studied, trained, and worked in ways he had never known. He took a deep breath and began speaking, explaining his plan clearly, honestly, and confidently. To his surprise, they listened. They asked questions, and he answered thoughtfully. By the end, they nodded, impressed by his creativity and insight. The young millionaire smiled at him. "I knew you had potential," he said quietly. "You just needed the chance to show it." The boy's chest swelled with pride. He realized that he had not only learned new skills, but had also gained confidence, the kind that comes from proving to yourself that you are capable. For the first time in his life, he felt that he could belong somewhere, that he could be recognized for his mind and heart, not judged by his past or his appearance. But life was not perfect. Old challenges from the streets still followed him. Some days he missed the freedom of wandering, the independence of surviving on his own. Sometimes memories of hunger, cold, and fear haunted him, and sometimes people he had once trusted turned out to be unkind or dismissive. The boy learned to navigate both worlds, the world he came from and the world he was entering. He learned lessons about trust, humility, and resilience. He learned that failure was not shameful but a part of growth. He discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to keep moving forward despite fear. One evening, after a long day at work and study, the boy returned to the park. It had become a special place for him, a place of reflection and memory. He sat on the same bench where he had first met the woman, thinking about how far he had come. He remembered the rain, the handkerchief, the quiet conversation that had started everything. He felt gratitude not only for the opportunities he had been given but also for the lessons he had learned about kindness, trust, and perseverance. As he sat there, the woman joined him. She smiled warmly. "You've grown so much," she said. "I'm proud of you." The boy looked at her, feeling a mix of humility and pride. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "Without your kindness, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have even imagined this life." She shook her head gently. "No, you did this yourself. I only helped you see what was already inside you. You have courage, determination, and a good heart. Those things can't be given, they have to be discovered." The boy nodded, realizing the truth in her words. He had discovered his own potential, not because someone handed it to him, but because someone believed in him enough to show him it existed. As the weeks turned into months, the boy continued to work and learn. He became more confident, more skilled, and more aware of the possibilities around him. People who had doubted him began to respect him. Opportunities he had never dreamed of started to appear. And yet he never forgot the streets, never forgot the struggles that had shaped him, never forgot the small act of kindness that had started it all. One day, a problem arose in the business, a difficult situation that required quick thinking and bravery. The young millionaire hesitated, unsure of how to handle it. The boy stepped forward, drawing on everything he had learned. He analyzed the situation, offered solutions, and helped manage the challenge successfully. The young millionaire watched in awe, realizing that the boy had grown beyond anyone's expectations. "You've changed," he said quietly later. "Not just in skill, but in who you are. You've become someone remarkable." The boy smiled softly. He remembered the rainy park, the handkerchief, the quiet moment of empathy, and he realized that his journey was far from over. But he had passed the most important test, believing in himself, and that was the turning point. The boy, once a street child with no direction, had found his path. He had faced challenges, learned new skills, and gained confidence. He had discovered the power of kindness, the importance of perseverance, and the value of believing in oneself. The boy was no longer just surviving. He was growing, thriving, and preparing for a life he had once thought impossible. From that day onward, the boy knew that life could be different, that opportunity was real, and that small acts of empathy, like the one he had shared with the crying woman, could change the course of a person's destiny forever. The boy's life had changed in ways he could hardly have imagined. From wandering the streets, scavenging for scraps of food, and hiding from danger, he had moved into a world of possibilities, learning, and growth. Yet, despite all the changes, he never forgot who he was or where he had come from. The streets, with all their hardships, had shaped him, taught him resilience, and given him a perspective that few people in his new world could understand. With each passing day, the boy became more confident, more skilled, and more aware of his potential. He no longer walked through life feeling invisible. People noticed him, not because of his appearance, but because of his intelligence, dedication, and the quiet strength that radiated from him. His mentors were proud of him, his colleagues respected him, and most importantly, he began to respect himself in ways he never had before. The woman who had first reached out to him continued to guide and support him. She encouraged him to think about the future, to set goals, and to imagine possibilities beyond his current circumstances. "You've come so far," she told him one day as they walked through the park. "But remember, this is just the beginning. You have the power to shape your life, to make choices that matter, and to become someone extraordinary." The boy nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. He thought about the path he had taken, from surviving on the streets to learning new skills, to earning trust and recognition in the business world. Each step had been difficult, each challenge had tested him, but each success had given him confidence and hope. He realized that his life was no longer defined by fear or scarcity, but by potential and opportunity. One afternoon, the young millionaire asked him to join a meeting with a group of investors. This was a responsibility far beyond what the boy had ever imagined for himself. He felt nervous, aware that he was entering a room full of experienced adults who might judge him harshly. But he also felt ready. He had spent months learning, growing, and proving himself. He knew that he could contribute meaningfully. The meeting began, and the boy listened carefully to the discussion. When the right moment came, he offered his insights clearly and confidently, suggesting practical solutions and creative ideas. The investors were impressed. They listened, asked questions, and considered his opinions seriously. The boy felt a thrill of pride, knowing that his voice mattered, that his thoughts were valued, and that he was no longer just a child from the streets but a contributor to something larger than himself. After the meeting, the young millionaire placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've done exceptionally well," he said. "I knew you had potential, but seeing it in action is remarkable. You're proving that hard work, honesty, and perseverance can take you far, no matter where you start." The boy smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had always known that life could be hard, but he was beginning to understand that life could also be fair and rewarding when you met it with courage and dedication. He realized that the kindness shown to him had opened doors, yes, but it had been his effort, determination, and heart that had allowed him to walk through them. Despite his success, he remained humble and grounded. He never forgot the friends he had left behind on the streets, the children who struggled daily, or the people who had overlooked him because of his appearance. He began volunteering, teaching other street children basic skills, sharing what he had learned, and offering encouragement. He wanted them to know that life could be different, that opportunities could exist, and that someone believed in them just as someone had believed in him. The woman who had guided him watched these actions with pride. She knew that he had grown not just in skill and confidence, but in character. He had learned that true success was not just about wealth or status, but about using your abilities to help others, to make a positive difference, and to live with integrity. One day, as the boy walked through the city, he noticed a child sitting alone by a fountain, looking lost and hungry. Memories of his own past flooded back, the loneliness, the fear, the longing for someone to care. Without hesitation, he approached the child, offering a warm smile and a small snack he had in his pocket. "Here," he said gently, "you can eat this. Are you okay?" The child looked up, surprised and cautious, but accepted the food. The boy sat beside him, talking softly, listening, and sharing a few words of encouragement. In that moment, he realized that life had come full circle. The boy who had once received kindness was now giving it freely, understanding how a small gesture could change someone's day, and perhaps even their future. Through these acts of kindness, the boy began to feel a deeper sense of purpose. He was no longer just surviving or learning. He was contributing, inspiring, and creating a ripple effect of positive change. The world that had once seemed so harsh and unwelcoming now felt full of possibilities, not just for him, but for others as well. As the years passed, the boy continued to grow, both personally and professionally. He pursued education, worked on projects that mattered, and built relationships based on trust, respect, and shared vision. He never forgot the lessons from the streets, the value of resilience, the importance of empathy, and the strength that comes from facing adversity head-on. He also never forgot the woman who had first shown him kindness. One evening, they sat together in the park, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The sky was painted in hues of orange, pink, and gold, reflecting off the buildings and the river. The boy, now taller and more confident, turned to her. "I can't thank you enough for what you did for me," he said. "You changed my life with something so simple, a handkerchief, a kind word, a moment of understanding. I will never forget it." The woman smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "No, you did this yourself," she replied. "I only helped you see what was already inside you. You had the courage, the heart, and the determination. I only guided you a little. The rest was yours." The boy thought about those words, realizing their truth. He had faced the streets alone, survived hunger, cold, and fear, and had grown stronger because of it. He had embraced opportunities, learned skills, built trust, and now helped others in need. His journey had transformed him from a boy struggling to survive into a young man, capable of making a real difference in the world. Years later, he returned to the place where it all began, the park bench under the oak tree, now surrounded by blooming flowers and children playing nearby. He sat down and reflected on the journey of his life. He remembered the rainy afternoon, the moment he had noticed the woman crying, and how a simple act of kindness had sparked a chain of events that changed everything. He realized that life was unpredictable, that hardships would come, and that success was never guaranteed. But he also knew that small acts of empathy, courage, and persistence could create opportunities and transform lives in ways that seemed impossible at first. He understood that everyone has the power to make a difference, to rise above circumstances, and to leave a positive mark on the world. The boy, now a young man, smiled, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. He had come from the streets, from a life of uncertainty and struggle, to a life of possibility, learning, and purpose. He had discovered the strength within himself and the impact of simple kindness. And he had learned that sometimes the smallest gestures, a handkerchief, a kind word, a moment of understanding, could be the beginning of something extraordinary. He stood up, looking around the park one last time before leaving. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but he felt ready. He had learned resilience, patience, and empathy. He had learned the power of hope and the importance of believing in oneself. And he had learned that, no matter where life began, it was always possible to create a future filled with purpose, compassion, and opportunity. As he walked away, he saw a child struggling to balance on the edge of the fountain. Smiling, he went over to help, offering his hand and guidance. In that moment, he realized that his journey was not just about his own success. It was about giving back, creating change, and continuing the cycle of kindness that had transformed his life. And so, the boy who had once seen a woman crying on a rainy afternoon became a young man who could inspire, guide, and make a difference. His life, shaped by struggle and strengthened by compassion, had become a story of hope, transformation, and the extraordinary power of small acts of kindness.